I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I will throw in, Diane, some swag for the mayor. You see this microphone here. My company, Global Media Archives, has created miniatures of the microphone. Actual copper, actual metal. I won't say they're fully functional. You can't sing through it, but the flag moves and the screws work and all that kind of stuff. So we want the mayor to have that for sure as a marker of some of the greatness that happened here. KWKH, Will K. Henderson. He was the president of the Shreveport Chamber of Commerce back in 1925. He cast the deciding vote to put this building here. And 3 years later, he found promise in a social studies teacher over at Dodd College, which is First Baptist. And he gave Jimmy Davis his first big break. Recorded his first record in 1928, introduced him to his good friend Huey Long, the railroad commissioner. And Jimmy got inspired to enter politics. Jimmy sang "You Are My Sunshine," one of the most popular songs after Happy Birthday ever recorded. He did so through this microphone. That was the beginning. And from there, we all know the Louisiana Hayride and the greatness. This microphone has over 200 hours of Hank Williams' DNA on it. He recorded his morning programs on KWKH when nobody knew who he was. Then he went to Nashville, but he wandered on back home. And in December of 1952, he passed away New Year's Eve, but 3 weeks earlier, he recorded his last record through this. James Burton played guitar behind Dale Hawkins on the recording Susie Q. They recorded it at KWKH through this microphone. John Fred and the Playboys recorded Judy in Disguise. Slim Whitman recorded his first 2 million selling records through it. His wife wouldn't let him quit his job as a Queensboro postman here in town until he had number 2 to make sure it was going to work out. And that record, Indian Love Call, went on for the next 40 years to be the top-selling record in Europe, in England, for 40 years until Bryan Adams' Everything I Do for You knocked him out of the position. Now think about that. The Beatles were along, every British invasion band, Slim Whitman can't beat him. Where did this come from? Not Nashville. Hank Williams was not a Nashville product. He got his start here. Kitty Wells, the first million-selling female country artist, she started here. Shreveport, not Nashville. Webb Pierce, the biggest selling artist, country artist of the 1950s, from West Monroe. Shreveport. Shreveport is the common thread. Shreveport is the why. We're here celebrating tonight the what. Elvis was here, he got his start, that's the what. Why? Why did this happen? Well, 125 years ago, this building wasn't here. And St. Paul's Bottoms was the home to the largest legal red light district in the world. Think about that. Houses of ill repute all up and down the street here, and Huddy Ledbetter playing on the porches. You've got bands like Led Zeppelin that worship Huddy Ledbetter and his influence. All of the British invasion artists will tell you they listened to the Hayride and were inspired by Elvis Presley. Elvis didn't invent rockabilly music, but he popularized it to the world through the 38-state coverage area of KWKH and through it being featured on Armed Forces Radio every 3 to 5 weeks in places like Italy and Ireland and Japan. You had the world's first Elvis impersonator was a Japanese fellow in 1956. In fact, when Elvis was here performing his final Hayride show out at the fairgrounds, they had him pose, take a picture of being on the telephone because they had the Japanese impersonator also with a picture on the phone, and Life magazine did a story about this new kid who already has people imitating him. The rich legacy that came from this city, not only of country music, but it could be argued the birth of rock and roll. Because as I say, Elvis popularized rockabilly music, and that turned into rock and roll. It came not from Nashville, not from Los Angeles, not from New York or London, England. It came from Shreveport. In 1963, September, just up the streets, civil rights riots going on. Sam Cooke comes here to this building to perform a concert. He'd called over the phone and reserved a room at the Holiday Inn, but when he showed up, they said, no, the colored hotels are down the street. He got upset, and his entourage was put in jail. So he performed at the Municipal Auditorium knowing that his entourage was waiting for him in prison. It inspired him to write a song based on that experience called A Change Is Gonna Come, which became an unofficial anthem of the civil rights movement, Shreveport. All of it comes back here, folks. This is Milam Street. Go up that way 3 blocks to the corner of Louisiana to where the Sanger brothers had a pharmacy, the world's first 24-hour pharmacy in 1911. They noticed all the kids coming in and putting pennies into the arcade machine and turning the handle and seeing the flip cards go by. There weren't movies yet, but they bought more of those machines, and a man came in town and said, you know what, you need to go upstairs and put in a movie theater. There's a new thing called movies. And so in 1914, they did that. And then they proceeded to start opening real movie theaters, including the Strand here in 1925, and the Sanger Theater in New Orleans, and 350 theaters around America. In 1929, they decided that was big enough, and they sold their interest to Paramount Pictures. Then the Depression hit, Paramount went under, and they asked to have a bankruptcy petition. And the only reason they were allowed into bankruptcy and allowed to emerge from bankruptcy was because of the land holdings associated with the Sanger Brothers theaters. So there would be no Paramount Pictures without a couple of 24-hour pharmacists from Shreveport, Louisiana. I could go on and on. We're here tonight because of Elvis Presley. Sam Phillips was connected to Shreveport. Stan Lewis, who many of you know from Stan's Records Company, where does he fit into all of this? Stan was responsible for outfitting the jukeboxes across the South. There were over 4,500 jukeboxes in America during Elvis's time here at the Hayride and Hank Williams' time here at the Hayride. So if you got your, I'm sorry, not 4,500, 450,000 in America. So Stan was influential. If you couldn't get your record on the radio, if you got it into his hands and he put it in a jukebox, that's where your million sellers came from. Half your records came from the jukeboxes. Stan took an interest in Elvis Presley, had him come down to his shop on Saturday mornings and do record signings and promotions in exchange for breakfast at Merle's. He didn't have the money for it. Mayor George DeMint, former mayor of Bossier City, tells a story of working at the Allied, a motel, and Elvis borrowed a pillow because their car had a hole in the back seat and he was tired of having his butt pricked by the springs. And as Mayor DeMint told you, I never got that pillow back. So much here, so much history in this building that it's just unbelievable. The people that rose to fame here, several dozen of the Country Music Hall of Famers came from here. The Nashville sound that was popularized in the 1970s was Chet Atkins and a Shreveport boy, Floyd Kramer. So you talk about country music, don't talk about the Grand Ole Opry. They showcased made talent. Shreveport, Louisiana made the talent. So we're here to celebrate Elvis tonight. I'm honored to be a part of this production. What he accomplished in the 53 performances here on the Louisiana Hayride the first 18 months of his career were amazing. And he came back to do a final show 6 months after they bought out his contract at the State Fairgrounds, at the Youth Building as it was known back then, where Horace Logan uttered the famous phrase, "Elvis has left the building." And the reason he did so is because KWKH in their wisdom didn't give Elvis his own separate show. He was the third act of 20. And when he finished at 9:30, all the teenagers started filing out of the building, and Horace stepped up to the microphone to let them know, hey, we're still going for another couple hours. and that had no effect whatsoever on anyone. Gary Bryant was the act from Washington State who had the unenviable task of following Elvis that night after he did a 5-minute burlesque version of Hound Dog. Because there's only like 7 words to that song, and he just kept doing it and dragging it out. Gary came out and thought, well, you know, Elvis didn't do Blue Suede Shoes, so I'll do that. He got about halfway through it and was booed off stage. They wanted Elvis back, but Elvis was gone. He came back to Shreveport several more times, 1975, 1977. He took over the top floor of the Chateau Suites Hotel downtown. And he would sit out in the hallway where he'd get a view of the whole hallway reading his Bible. Police officer Robert Katz, who knew Elvis from his 1956 show, Katz had sleepy eyes and kind of looked like Elvis, so they used him as a decoy. Katz, unfortunately, was given the task of driving up to the state fairgrounds in a pink Cadillac and was mobbed by the fans while Elvis, in a yellow Ford, slipped in the back door. So years later, in 1975, Katz requested the duty of being Elvis's bodyguard at the Chateau, and Elvis was out in the hallway reading his Bible, and Katz and his friends, giggling, released a raccoon onto the floor and terrorized Elvis a little bit, as you might imagine. Elvis loved Shreveport. It was a wonderful place for him to get a start and to find himself. He told James Burton that his happiest years were at the Louisiana Hayride. Colonel Tom Parker kind of sidelined him into movies and into Vegas and other avenues where maybe Elvis wouldn't go. And Elvis didn't go overseas because Colonel Tom didn't have a passport. He was a Dutch immigrant and had no way to get back into the country if he left it with Elvis. So they kept Elvis domestic, but Elvis was loyal to the Colonel and stuck by him throughout. So anyway, I think I've talked enough about this, but this is a great event, the 70th anniversary of a remarkable occurrence, and it's all about Shreveport, and we just need to embrace that and let the world know that so much of music history and world history happened here. Diane is collecting money tonight for the Ronald McDonald House, and I encourage you to give money to that. My company, Global Media Archives, that owns the recordings and the images from the Louisiana Hayride and other archives, is proud to give you $1,000 tonight to jumpstart things. So thank you so much, Diane. Thank you, Dave. Winston, you're every bit the cheerleader ever since W.K. Henderson himself. Doggone ya. His saying was Shreveport on the air, Shreveport everywhere. And I think you embody that. So thank you for all you do. Thank you folks for coming out tonight.
I loved all that history.
Yes, ma'am.